Hi there. So I finished 600 music tracks and got them all placed in music production, music libraries, and I also earn a reasonable income from that now. After 6 years, it took me to get 600 tracks in. So I thought at the end of my sixth year, as I am pretty much now, in December 2024, that it would be really good to just look back and to think about what I learned from composing, finishing and getting 600 music tracks into production libraries. So here we go. I have a big list of notes here. So the first thing I would say is getting into a regular habit of creating is absolutely vital. Waiting for inspirations to strike is a no-go. I think you have to pick your times of the week and plan the times of the week that you're going to compose and just sit down and compose. I don't think there's any point in just waiting until you have time. You have to carve out time, put it in your diary and have a fixed schedule. Next thing, a little and often is better than a lot altogether. I really do think that it's a great idea to try and compose every single day if you can do, even if you don't feel like it. It's sort of like flexing a muscle and building a muscle memory. The more you do it, the better. And I think it's, at least I go for a run, isn't it? You're much better running 3 or 4 times a week than you are for 10 or 15 minutes than you are trying to do 2 or 3 hours once a week. Try to separate the creative from the technical. It's really difficult to get, it's really easy rather to get bogged down in routing and choosing instruments and sorting out technical stuff. And that can really get in the way of the creative flow. So I found that to try and do the creative stuff first, or the creative stuff separate from the technical stuff is really helpful. So having like a template or doing your actual writing, sketching it out, not worrying if it's totally in time or you've got all of the notes right, but getting a creative flow going and then going back and sorting out the technical stuff works really well for me anyway. Remember, your judgment can be clouded by your emotion. I think it's very easy to, if you're not in a great mood or you're tired or, you know, life is taking over, it can be really difficult to be objective about your music. And conversely, if you're in a really great place, you can write stuff and think, oh, that's amazing, and look at it the next day and it's probably not. I think what I'm trying to say is that you need to really get to a space where you can separate your day-to-day emotion, the surface emotion, from writing your music and sort of separate the two. I think if you interpolate the two and mix up the two, it can be quite damaging and quite difficult to sort of get an objective view of what you're working on. Plan before you write. There's nothing worse, in my opinion, than sitting down to a blank DAW or a blank piece of paper. Have an idea in your mind about what mood the music's going to be, what instruments you're going to be using, what the purpose of the track is, how long it's got to be, where the peaks and troughs are, so you've got some skeleton outline before you even put pen to paper. Use a template wherever possible. Massive time saver. I am on the fence on this. I have to be honest. I sort of would say to anybody, use a template. I don't necessarily always myself, because I find that I just end up going to the same sounds over and over again. However, if you're writing, like I do, an album of 10 tracks that are all going to have a similar sort of vibe, having a template, if you've got a string section in it, for example, that's going to be repeated in all of the tracks, then having that set up ready is a massive time saver, for example. So consider using a template. It's a really useful tool. But bear in mind, it can sometimes just sort of send you down the same direction sonically over and over again. You'll improve by writing and finishing lots of tracks rather than trying to perfect just one or two. And that's been a really big lesson for me. I think you have to let go of perfection, which ties in with the timescale thing, doesn't it, of getting into a regular habit of composing and finishing. You much better, you're going to make more progress by writing a lot of tracks and finishing them, so-called finishing them, even if they're not perfect, than you are hammering away at that one track trying to get it perfect and complete. It'll be a total mind screw trying to do that. So I personally would advise trying to write a number of different tracks all at the same time. Actually, I tend to write 4 or 5 at the same time so that I don't get stuck and I'm always coming to things fresh, rather than concentrating on one and trying to get the perfect track finished before you move on. Learn from reference tracks, but be gentle on yourself. So reference tracks are really, really helpful, I think. Having it up in your DAW while you're writing, so you can compare sound, you can compare vibe and mood and production and things. This can be a really, really helpful learning tool, and also sort of taking that to its furthest extension, transcribing music and copying music that others have done to learn from. You're sort of lifting the bonnet and looking how the car works, or tinkering with the mechanics. What do you call it? Reverse engineering, I think, is really, really helpful. However, the caveat of that is that you do need to be gentle on yourself with that, because it's very easy to get to the stage where you're listening to something that sounds amazing that somebody else has done and you're miles off it and you're going, oh God, this is really rubbish, I'll never get there. But you might be 5 or 10 years behind them. You may not have the equipment that they have got. You may not have got the skills. You may not have had the opportunity that they have yet. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get there. It just means that at the moment there is a gap. And I think getting to yourself where you can be grateful that you can actually use other people's work to inspire and help and to teach you is really, really important. Transcription is a pain, but it works. I just said that a minute ago. Transcribing music, literally either writing it or recording it somehow from what you hear, or copying what you hear in the DAW as close as you can do, is so vital and so important in terms of learning chord progressions, orchestration, every single thing. It's taking that, looking under the bonnet and the reverse engineering to its sort of nth degree. And it's a painful, slow process, but I do honestly believe that almost every moment that you spend transcribing, you can learn something, and something will soak into your sort of composer brain for your further use later down the line. Set yourself deadlines for finishing stuff. Sort of alluded to this already. It's linked in with, writing lots of tracks rather than writing just the one track and getting it perfect. If you don't have a deadline, you'll never finish it. So even if they are artificial deadlines that you've got in your mind, which a lot of my work is actually, I make sure that I write 4 tracks per fortnight, so 2 a week. And come hell or high water, at the end of that fortnight, those 4 tracks are done. It's so important, and you just got to have the self-discipline and the conviction within yourself that that's what you want to do. Write with a timer. I use just a little very cheap Amazon kitchen timer. So my writing sessions, personally, it works for me to write in 50-minute blocks. I have a little bit of a plan about what I'm going to do in that block before I start, and I just absolutely work without concentrating on anything else in that 50 minutes. And that's quite tiring. I have a break after that for 10 or 15 minutes, then do another one. So I don't check my phone, I don't check emails, no distractions whatsoever. You've got to absolutely focus, in my opinion, and have those periods of time where you can get into a flow state. And very often that 50 minutes will fly by. But then I think it's really important to walk away from the DAW, have 10 or 15 minutes break, and then come back and do another block. That works for me, has worked really well for me. Your brain may work in a different way, but I do think having a timer and having a set period of time where you're going to achieve something is really helpful, rather than just having, oh, well, I'll sit here until I'm tired and can't move any further. Train your family and friends to respect your work time. Now, this is a really big one. So for me, I work from home, and actually my family are great. But there is always a temptation that, it's my older kids are the worst. It's like, well, Dad's at home. He can answer the phone. Dad can go out and do this. Actually, no, I'm working. This is my work time. As simple as, so my office here, or my studio here, is right by the front door. As simple as when people come in during when it's my working hours, please don't bang on the window and come in and say hi and everything while I'm working. As soon as you come in the door, just, just don't interrupt me. It's a reasonable request. If I was out at work, that wouldn't happen. But just because you're at home, which you're likely to be, it doesn't mean that it has to be any different, within reason, I think. So that's a really important one, and it allows you to get that focus and that flow state down, I think. And I think if you can get your family and friends on with that, that really, really helps. So minimize distractions, and and I think that's what I've been saying all along. And that goes from not having notifications on the computer, not having my phone on the table as I normally don't. I have it in the other room while I'm working. Not having anything else to distract you. There's nothing much else in here that distracts me, really. I have my diary here, but I don't normally have that here. It's just because I'm doing this video now. It's normally pretty clear workspace. The door is closed. There's nothing else in here to distract me apart from the dog who's usually in here. Get out of your studio and exercise. I think that for me, again, if I'm working for 4, 5, 6 hours a day, I can't do that on the trot. I tend to work 2 hours. I'll go out and walk the dog, come back, do another 2 hours, walk the dog in the afternoon, do another 2 hours, that sort of thing. I really don't think you can sit still for 6 hours. It's impossible. So I really do think that the work day or your work hours or however you work your composing, you need to intersperse it with some sort of physical exercise. I do find that often when I'm out away from the studio, walking the dog or whatever I'm doing, usually in the rain because I live in the UK, I will sort of subconsciously go through what I've just done and sort out problems in my mind or work out what I'm going to work on next. And it's sort of part of your work time, part of the work day. Get enough sleep and good food. I think I'm not in any position to offer advice on this particularly. I do find though, if I'm eating healthily, particularly for me, if I'm getting 8 hours sleep a night, I work a lot better, hugely amount better the day after. I'm one of those people that can sleep for 8 to 10 hours with no problems whatsoever. Luckily, if I get 6 hours, which I do sometimes if I go to bed late or get up early, I really feel it, particularly the day after the day after. I've also learned it's better to have a few really great sample libraries that you know really well than to have hundreds that you rarely use. I learned that the hard way, I think. I thought that I needed to have loads of different sounds, and I bought a lot of crap really that I haven't used. And what I should have done is concentrated on getting some really high quality libraries, the best I could afford, and learning those inside out. And I think that is vitally important. That also does contribute to creating a bit of a sound for you as well. If you've just got limited resources, I think having everything available on one of these subscription models, which is what I did for a start. I signed up to East West Composer Cloud. I don't know whether that was the right thing to do. I think you're better possibly just concentrating on higher quality samples and having less of them. Forget your day-to-day feelings and look at the big picture. Well, that ties in actually with what I said earlier about not listening too strongly to your emotion. I think we can really get bogged down in what feels like a treadmill of writing, and on the day-to-day, I think on a day-to-day basis, when you're doing stuff, you can lose sight of why you're doing this. And I think that's okay. And I think you have to trust the big picture. You have to trust the plan that you made, particularly with what I do, production music. My plan, I have a 10-year plan on this. I'm in year 6 at the moment, so a 10-year plan to have written 1,000 tracks. And 3 years ago, I wasn't really earning any money from this, and I was essentially working full time on it, cranking out 2 tracks a week. And that's a tough gig. It's a really, really tough gig. You have to look at the big picture. Sometimes you get a royalty payment that's not as big as you want. You have to look at the big picture, the overarching thing. Sometimes you just can't get a track right and you sort of feel, I really can't do this. But you have to look at the big picture. I'd already written loads of tracks. One can compose. You're just stuck in a particular hole at the moment. You need to look at the big picture and think about the why you're doing this and what's the overall arching plan to keep you going, I think. And for me personally, creating your calm, happy place, I think, is really, really important to work in. I haven't got this right here at all. Quite. I don't know whether mine is. It's quite calm. It's not how I'd have it ideally, but it's getting there, I suppose, to a certain extent. Physically, physically think about the space that you work in. How do you want it to look? What's really comfortable for you? What's inviting for you? But also it's a state of mind, I think, as well. I try to sit down here to work, and genuinely this is my happy place. Writing music is my happy, calm place most of the time. I have a sense of it just being what I should be doing, a really deep sense of that, and a deep sense of calm, and a deep sense of rightness when I'm sitting here. And I think creating, and however you achieve that, I think you need to be aiming for that and trying to get there with that. I've also said this previously, but have a few tracks on the go at the same time at different stages, so you don't get bored or stuck on one track. So as I said earlier, I tend to have 4 or so tracks going on at the same time, so you don't get bored or stuck with each track. If they can be at different stages, so you're sort of dovetailing how you're getting on with things, that can work really well. So if you're doing the grunt work of trying to work out the chord progressions or the structure of one track, of a couple of tracks, maybe you're polishing off and finishing and doing sort of mixing and stuff on another 2 tracks, so that everything's not at the same stage all the time. But having things all going on at the same time for me is really, really important. I personally don't work well if I'm working on one track for 3 days and have to finish it in 3 days to perfection. Starting is easy, finishing and getting a coherent whole is much, much harder. And that's a really big lesson, I think. That does get better. I think starting tracks is, I've learned this in doing 600 of them. Starting tracks is really easy. Getting that initial idea, the initial enthusiasm. You're always, there's a peak and a trough of this in my experience, in that you start off with what you think is a really cool idea, you work with it for a little while, you then start getting a bit tired of it, you don't quite know where to go, and the whole thing just goes down, the energy goes down, and then starts to creep up again as you work with it. And I think you have to sit out that trough. And I think all too often we assume when you're in that trough that what you're doing is rubbish, and actually more often than not it's not. It's a case of just working through the stuff, coming out of the other side and finishing that way. Okay, I hope there's something of use in there for you if you are doing production music or writing music of any sort. If you've got stuff that you've learnt from writing and finishing tracks, please put it in the comments. I'd be really interested to hear about that. And thank you very, very much for watching, and I hopefully see you in another video soon. Thanks then. Bye-bye.